the Israeli regime, if they dare strike back at Iran, we will hit them much harder next time. We will beat them into submission.
76 years of conflict, countless lives lost, and a region on the brink. Now, Iran's Professor Marandi issues a fierce warning. If Israel strikes again, Iran's retaliation will be relentless, and the world could feel the shockwaves. Are we about to witness the next deadly chapter in this relentless struggle?
And the history of this conflict doesn't go back to last year. It is 76 years of ethno-supremacism, ethnic cleansing, and this is a racist regime that you support.
Professor Mohammad Marandi isn't holding back. In a rare, unfiltered interview, Marandi lays bare his deep frustration with Israel, calling its government an ethnic supremacist regime built on a foundation of inequality and discrimination. According to him, this isn't some recent scuffle. It's a conflict rooted in 76 years of violence, displacement, and what he describes as the systemic mistreatment of Palestinians. Marandi's words are heavy, and his tone is unwavering, clearly a reflection of Iran's official stance. And he's unapologetically critical. For Marandi, this isn't about one missile strike, but rather a long-standing struggle for justice in what he believes is an unfair, racially biased power dynamic that has stripped Palestinian people of their rights and their land.
I think that's a lot of wishful thinking on behalf of you and your colleagues at Sky News.
What seems to frustrate Marandi is the way the Western media, especially outlets like Sky News, frame this conflict. In his view, their coverage is one-sided, deliberately supportive of Israel and dismissive of Iran's actions. When questioned about the effectiveness of Iran's missile attack, Marandi counters by accusing Western media of engaging in wishful thinking. From his perspective, this attack wasn't a misstep or failure, but rather a calculated message sent straight to Israel's military nerve center. The few missiles that didn't get through, to Marandi, they're irrelevant. What matters is the larger blow that Iran claims to have delivered to Israel's security, an act that he says went far beyond simple retaliation.
And the Palestinian people on that land who've been displaced and pushed into Gaza and who've been slaughtered regularly over 76 years, we will not stand for that.
The roots of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict go back to 1948, a year that, in Marandi's view, marks the beginning of a dark chapter for Palestinian families. When Israel was established, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were forced from their homes, launching what Marandi sees as an ongoing era of ethnic cleansing. According to him, this wasn't a single event, but rather the start of systematic displacement, pushing Palestinians into small enclaves like Gaza and stripping them of their homeland. He describes Israel as a state that has, from its inception, been driven by an ethnic supremacist ideology that places certain groups above others and has little regard for the rights of the people originally inhabiting the land.
And unlike the Israeli regime, which constantly carries out slaughter and genocide and was carrying out a Holocaust in Gaza, we struck their military targets because, unlike you, we actually care about human rights.
For Marandi, the conflict isn't just about land or borders. It's about decades of oppression, trauma, and loss. He argues that this history has cemented a deep-seated resentment and resistance within the Palestinian community, and that same animosity fuels Iran's stance today. Displaced families, now generations removed from their original homes, have grown up under restrictions, violence, and hardships. Marandi believes this has bred a justified resistance, not just among Palestinians but across the region, particularly in countries like Iran that share cultural and religious ties with the Palestinian cause. Professor Marandi makes it clear that Iran's missile capability is more than just a show of strength. He describes Iran's countless underground missile sites as a strategic network built to withstand any attack. This missile arsenal isn't just tucked away in random bunkers. These sites are fortified, massive complexes scattered across Iran, ready to launch a counterstrike at a moment's notice. According to Marandi, it's not a question of if these missiles will be used. It's a warning that they are ready to strike hard if Iran feels provoked.
Iran has countless underground missile sites with hundreds of thousands of missiles across the country. They were made after the US invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan to deal with a potential war with the United States.
This level of preparation didn't just happen overnight. Marandi highlights how these defenses were so specifically developed after the U.S. invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. Iran saw those invasions as a clear signal that Western forces could turn their attention to Tehran at any time. So, over the years, Iran invested heavily in these underground missile sites to deter any potential threat. In Marandi's view, this network of missiles isn't just defensive, it's a message to the world, and Israel in particular, that Iran isn't afraid to escalate if necessary. This military buildup has, according to Marandi, put Iran in a position where it could overwhelm any potential counterattack. To Marandi, these missiles are not just weapons, they're symbols of Iran's refusal to back down. He frames this arsenal as a standing threat to Israel. If Israel dares to respond, it would be met with a force it isn't prepared for. Each missile represents a calculated promise of retaliation, a reminder that Iran's military power extends beyond borders. It's not only about protecting Iran, it's about supporting the Palestinian cause, challenging what Marandi sees as an ongoing history of aggression by Israel.
Unlike you, we do not believe in chosen people. And the Palestinian people on that land who've been displaced and pushed into Gaza and who've been slaughtered regularly over 76 years, we will not stand for that. All people in the whole of Palestine must be equal. The Israeli regime, if they strike Iran, we will hit them much harder next time. And they can pretend that they got away.
Israel is facing a tough choice right now, and it's exactly the kind of situation Marandi says Iran has been preparing for. According to Marandi, any strike Israel makes against Iran would set off a much larger counterattack from Tehran, one that could devastate Israel's infrastructure. It's a high-stakes game of chess, and Israel, Marandi argues, is cornered. He insists that Iran's response would be so intense it would cripple Israel's military and essential systems, hitting deep at the core of Israeli defense and infrastructure. Marandi believes this goes beyond just military tactics. It's a powerful warning. If Israel retaliates, Iran will target key facilities, places crucial to Israel's ability to function and defend itself. Marandi is blunt about what Iran is capable of and emphasizes that Iran's strike wouldn't be just a response, but a calculated effort to disrupt Israel's defenses at their foundation. It's clear he wants Israel to think twice, not only about the immediate consequences, but also about the potential long-term impacts if Iran's threats become reality. Then there's Israel's stance on targeting Iran's oil installations and nuclear facilities. According to Marandi, Israel might be considering attacks on these sites as a way to hurt Iran's economy and military capabilities. But he's equally firm that this would be a mistake. Any attempt by Israel to go after Iran's oil and nuclear sectors would unleash a counterstrike from Iran so severe it could destroy Israel's infrastructure. In Marandi's view, Israel's options are limited: strike and face overwhelming retaliation, or hold back and avoid setting off an escalation that could become catastrophic.
And unlike the Israeli regime, which constantly carries out slaughter and genocide and was carrying out a Holocaust in Gaza, we struck their military targets because, unlike you, we actually care about human rights, not you.
Professor, let me just say that we're on the verge of an all-out war, or certainly a war between Israel and Iran. It could be a war that Iran loses. If Iran does lose that war, do you think that the current Iranian regime could survive a defeat? Because that is if what you say is right, then Iran is going to hit back even harder.
According to Professor Marandi, if the U.S. decides to intervene in support of Israel, it could set off a crisis that stretches far beyond the Middle East. Marandi warns that any American involvement would backfire, triggering fierce resistance from neighboring countries like Iraq, where anti-U.S. sentiments run high. He predicted that Iraqi forces and allied groups across the region would quickly mobilize to push U.S. troops out, creating a massive regional backlash against American interests. Marandi's concerns go beyond immediate military action. He sees U.S. involvement as a spark that could collapse global oil and gas markets, with consequences for economies around the world. With so much of the world's oil flowing from the Middle East, any disruption could lead to skyrocketing prices, shortages, and economic strain. This instability, Marandi argues, wouldn't just impact the nations involved in the conflict, it would ripple through the global economy, affecting everything from fuel prices to food costs. He even suggests that millions could be displaced as countries struggle to manage the fallout.
Iran will not hit back harder. Iran will hit back much harder. The head of the Iranian forces says Iran will target and destroy all of the Israeli regime's infrastructure. This was the tip of the iceberg. Iran will lose no war. The Israeli regime will. It is time for you and others to end your racism.
In Professor Marandi's view, there's only one way to achieve lasting peace in the region. The Israeli regime, as it exists now, must come to an end. He's firm in his conviction that Israel's current system, which he sees as built on a superior race ideology, cannot coexist with genuine equality and peace in the Middle East. For Marandi, this isn't just about the clash of armies or military strategies. It's a much deeper issue of justice and human rights. He believes that peace is only possible if there's equality for everyone in the region, Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. This means dismantling what he describes as a regime rooted in a racial hierarchy which, in his words, has suppressed the rights and dignity of Palestinians for decades. To Marandi, Israel's policies represent more than just political or territorial ambitions. He sees them as a social order based on exclusion and inequality. In his perspective, these policies reinforce a system where one group dominates over others. He argues that such a structure can never lead to real peace. According to him, this struggle isn't just about borders or resources. It's about changing a system that, in his eyes, treats some people as inherently superior to others. Marandi envisions a new Middle East, one where there's no chosen people narrative or racial preference, a place where everyone, regardless of background, has equal rights and opportunities. This, he insists, is what Iran is fighting for. For Marandi, Iran's military actions and its unyielding stance against Israel are part of a broader mission to reshape the region into a more just and inclusive society. And he's clear that Iran won't back down until this vision is realized. Marandi believes that as long as Israel holds on to what he calls its ethno-supremacist foundations, real peace will remain out of reach. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.